Ois Dalet. So up till now, we talked about basically three levels. We talked about Shuvah reaches till the level of Ishtalshalus, ad v'loy ad b'chlal. And then we talked about the higher level than Ishtalshalus, ad v'loy ad b'chlal. And then the Rebbe explained that in higher than Ishtalshalus itself, it has to be a higher level because the level of higher than Ishtalshalus is still included in ad v'ad b'chlal because it comes through Ishtalshalus. So the level of ad v'loy ad b'chlal is a higher level, not only higher than Ishtalshalus, or the Rebbe explained this would be almost the level of Atik, Pnimis HaKeser, because that would be v'loy ad b'chlal. The Rebbe now is going to explain that it goes even higher than that. And the Rebbe explains that when we say over here, higher, v'loy ad b'chlal, it's the level of Atzmus Ein Sof higher. As the Rebbe goes through and explains this very, very beautifully. And deeper, we can say over here, deeper meaning more, it's on a higher level. Havayah Elokecha la'achrei she'omer kvar Shuvah Yisrael ad. The Torah, the Pasuk says, after it said already Shuvah Yisrael, it adds Shuvah ad Havayah Elokecha. What is the addition? After he said already Shuvah Yisrael ad, so we already got the ad and beloy ad b'chlal, and now we're saying Havayah and Elokecha a higher madrege. So what is the level of Havayah Elokecha? Shehavayah hu rak Bechinas Elikim v'tzimtzum, that Bechlal Havayah is only a level of Elikim v'tzimtzum. It's Havayah is really Elikim. It's not really Havayah. It's really Elikim because relative to the higher madregas, legabe nisof shalamayla Havayah hu lamayla yoser gam me'ad v'le'ad b'chlal. So which means Havayah Elokecha is higher than ad v'le'ad b'chlal. So you have ad, shtalshlus. You have v'loy ad b'chlal, which is higher than shtalshlus. Havayah Elokecha is in higher than shtalshlus, also higher than shtalshlus, and that's why Havayah Elokecha. The Rebbe is going to explain now that the Havayah, sometimes Yud Kei Vav Kei is spelled Elikim. And the Rebbe brings down from Likutei Torah that when it's Havayah, which is spelled Elikim, it's a higher level in Havayah. When we say Shuvah Yisrael ad, and then we say Havayah Elokecha, it's not just Havayah spelled Yud Kei Vav Kei, but it's also Havayah spelled Elikim. And we say that even the level of Havayah, and not just Havayah as spelled with the nikud, with the vowelization of Elikim, means that it's spelled Yud Kei Vav Kei written, but it's spelled Elikim, and it's pronounced Elikim when we do it. So when we say over here Shuvah Yisrael ad Havayah, that includes even the higher level of Havayah. Havayah b'nikud Elikim. And the Rebbe is going to explain from Likutei Torah that even that level of Havayah, it's considered Havayah is Elikim. It's not. It's only Elikim. So that means that even the level of Havayah b'nikud Elikim is only considered. That's the highest level in Havayah. That's also considered only to be Elikim on a lower madrega. So it means that the higher madrega is the level of Asmus, which is even higher than that. The Rebbe explains. Let's look inside. that explained earlier, the Havayah shebeposik Shuvah Yisrael ad Havayah Elikecha. In the previous Mamer, he says, when we say, you return Yisrael until Havayah Elikecha, what Havayah, what name of Havayah we're talking about? Nichlal Gam Havayah Benikud Elikim. That includes also the name of Havayah as it's vowelized with the name Elikim. Shehi darge nailis b'yoser. That's a very elevated level. It's higher than Havayah stam. Kivur b'kut Torah. As explained in Likutei Torah, ala posik, it says, Kain adnai Havayah, or Havayah spelled there Elikim. In adnai Elikim, adnai Havayah, yatzmiach tzedakah. So the Alter Rebbe explains over there what is the level when we say Adnai Havayah Elikim Yasmiach Tzedakah. So but there he talks about Goydel Ha'ilui Shel Beis Hashemes Adnai Havayah Benikud Elikim. The great advantage of the two names of Hashem when we say Adnai Havayah Benikud Elikim. So he talks over there that Havayah b'nikud elikim is on a greater level than stam Havayah. And yet, what does the pasuk say? Shuvah Yisrael ad Havayah Elokecha. This taich that Havayah is Elokecha. It's not really the greatest. It's still only Elokecha. Ksiv ad Havayah Elokecha shegam Havayah zeh hu rak b'chinas elikim v'tzimtzum legabe inisof shel hamayla Havayah. So this level of Havayah as vowelized with Elikim is only Elikim. Havayah is Elokecha. It's not really. Because the Madrege, which is the higher than Havayah, Benikud Elikim, is even greater. Kigam Havayah, Benikud Elikim, Ushem Bilvad. Even though it's vowelized Elikim, it's still, nevertheless, it's a name. It's the Abish is called with the name Havayah, Benikud Elikim. Okay, Mavur B'Likutei Torah, as explained in Torah, Likutei Torah explains that even though Adna Havayah is a high level, it says Adna Havayah Yitoka Yitka B'Shofar Yitoka. Yet that Adna Havayah is not the ultimate. It's not a Shefer Godel. It's not V'Hoya B'Yemahu. There is no name. So, meaning, even though we're talking about Adna Havayah, and we're talking about Havayah Elokecha, even the name Havayah should become Elokecha, this Havayah B'Nikud Elikim is not yet the ultimate, because over there there's no Shefer Godel, and it's still a name. It explains like this. It says, Kivon Shegam Ad B'Nikud Elikim Shefer Stam. No, it's being based on Dargis. Beis HaDargis the Shofar. As explained in Likutei Torah, the two levels of Shofar, that is going to be in the future to come. So the first level is V'adnai Havayah b'Shofar Yitoka. And this is Havayah b'Nikud Elikim. So Adnai Elikim b'Shofar Yitka. So that's level. That says just b'Shofar. And we have another pasuk L'Osud Lova in which it says Yitoka b'Shofar Godel, a big shofar. This is a plain shofar, and that's a big shofar. Shofar, the Adna Havayah b'Shofar Yitka. The shofar Adna Havayah blows. Kiva shekam Adnai shekam Adna Havayah b'Nikud Elikim emrak shemis. Since at the end of the day it's only name, so even though it's the highest level, it's a level of Elikim Nikud. It's still a shame. Who shofar stam? It's a plain shofar. Adna Havayah b'Shofar. You talk about Shefer Godel. Over there it says blow in a big shofar. And it doesn't say Havayah Adna nothing. It says blow because there's no name of this higher than a name. You talk a stam, it says blow. It doesn't say who blows it. This is the level that is hidden of all hidden places. It's the higher than any shemus in handling any the stima the whole stima, hidden of all hiddens. And Torah explains that this difference between loss and love between Adna Havayah Yitka and the Yitoka b'Shefer Godel is really the chilek between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. So there is a chilek ben Rosh Hashanah and Kippurim Now that's similar to the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Shashefer, the Rosh Hashanah, that level of Rosh Hashanah, who al derech va'adna Havayah b'shofar yitka. That's adna Havayah blows in the shofar. That's the level of Rosh Hashanah. Aber b'yom HaKippurim, see, over there it says lifnei Havayah, meaning beyond Havayah titoru. That means that we reach in a higher level than the shemus of Havayah. This is lifnei Havayah. L'mayla me'Havayah b'higher than Havayah. V'yisayra mezu, and even more than just being higher than Havayah. We don't even mention our name here. We say ki b'yom hazeh yichaper aleichem. It doesn't say b'yom hazeh Hashem yichaper aleichem, not Havayah lekim, not nikud. It just says on this day yichaper aleichem, which is tam. It doesn't say who's going to atone. It doesn't no name. It's higher than name. It's like we said before. Bayemu yitoka b'shofar gadol. That's when. That's in Yom Kippur. Al derech yitoka b'shofar gadol. Yitoka stam. So now we're already after Rosh Hashanah. We're in Shabbos Teshuvah. Shabbos Teshuvah already starts the Havayah of Yom Kippur. So bezo she'emrim b'haftoyre the Shabbos Teshuvah. So that's why in Haftoyre Shabbos Teshuvah we say Shuvah Yisrael ad Havayah Elokecha. So we're saying that even Havayah is still Elokecha. Shabbai is a goy koi gamal Havayah b'nikad Elikim. This Havayah goes even as we vowelize it the name Elikim. It's still Hashem is still Havayah, and we're saying Havayah Elokecha. That's still Elokecha, because now on Shabbos Teshuvah we get the level of Yom Kippur already, which is the level Stam Yechaper. There's no Shemus over there, higher than Shemus. Shabbos Teshuvah yeshna kvar ha'ilui me'ein ha'ilui Yom Kippurim. On Shabbos Teshuvah, we have similar to the advantage of Yom Kippur. And relative to that advantage, it's only a level of Elikim v'tzimtzum. Even the level of Havayah b'nikud, b'nikud Elikim, it's still Adnai, and we're saying Elokecha. Hashem is only Elokecha, because this is a higher level that we tap in. The Rebbe continues. So based on this, we can explain the question we had before. After he says Shuvah Yisrael, he continues to say, Yesh Levayir. So now, according to this, now that we explained that this is the higher madrega, so we can also explain that after saying Shuvah Yisrael, so after saying Shuvah Yisrael ad, which also includes the also ad v'loy ad b'chlal. So you already that. So moisiv Havayah Elokecha. Then he adds Havayah Elokecha, which is that even the Havayah is still Elokecha. Why? Kigam inyan ad v'loy ad b'chlal, because even the ad v'loy ad b'chlal, which is higher not only than Hishtalshelus, but it is in higher than Hishtalshelus. V'loy ad b'chlal isn't higher. Av she'en shayich boy gam yidiyas hashlila. As the Rebbe said before, In v'loyad b'chlal, higher than ishtalshlus, at least there's idiyas hashlila. Because from the level of the ad, you know the loyad, you know the higher than ishtalshlus. But that is on the lower level. But then we said that in the higher meaning of that would really be part of ishtalshlus, and the higher, which means even in higher than ishtalshlus, is higher level is that there is not even over there the yididus hashlila in al siv gimel. So it seems like you're already not only higher than ishtalshlus, but you're higher than ishtalshlus, because you're at a level which not only yididus hashlila, which you would know from ishtalshlus, this is higher. It comes like you said, the etzem haneshama, but still mikol mokoim. But yet it has a shaykhus to hishtalshlus, because the fact that you got to negate and say, well, ad, and it's not ad b'chlal, you have to negate it. Move on sheyesh lo eze shaykhus. That means it has some sort of connection. Why would you have to say that it doesn't include it if you have to negate it? So while you're talking about a level which is even higher than Yedidus Hashlila, but still it does have some connection, because of negating this means that it has a connection. The Rebbe gives an example where we see that it's higher, but it's still connected. The Baal Haratz, as the idea of the master of the will. So the Eibishter has a will, that's a Ratzin. But then the forgiveness comes from the level of the Baal Harotzin. So that means that the Baal Harotzin is higher than the Rotzin. But still we call him the Baal Harotzin, means that there is a Shach of the Rotzin. In the Baal Harotzin, similar to the idea, the master of the will. That's where forgiveness comes from, because the Rotzin you violated. Now you do it Teshuvah, so you get forgiven because the master of the will could want it, and now he says okay, because he is the master of the will. It was explained earlier. The Bechlolus, what level can we call that? The Baal Harotzen, who inyan Hashemis Admu Havayah benikud Elokim. That's Admu Havayah with the violation of Elokim, with the violation, the Nekudis of Elokim, Havayah Elokim. Shal Yodom, through them, through Havayah, Adna Havayah, B'nigud Elokim, Mismalim Kol HaBegomim, you fill all the blemishes. How does it fill? Dagam, but still, how does it fill it? Dagam shezeh shenimsheches imenu haslicha, al zeh she'osu hepech harotzen. How does forgiveness extend from the Baal Harotzin, because they did against Hashem's will, is because you tap into a place where he doesn't have to want. It's not the expressive one, that's the Baal Harotzin. But even at that level, yes, Rotzin has a connection to it. The Rotzin, even though he's not Mukhrach Barotzin, but the Baal Harotzin has a Shaykhus to the Rotzin. It's evidence from this. You call him the Baal Harotzin, means he has a Shaykhus to the Rotzin. That's why there needs to be forgiveness. On the place of the Baal Harotzin, you can get forgiveness, but there needs to be a forgiveness, because you did Hepech HaRotzin, which means in the Baal Rotzin has an impact that at least you know you have to forgive it there. But when you talk Atzin Yisov, which is even higher than Baal Rotzin, over there there's no blemish to begin with. Nothing happened relative to the level of Atzmus. You don't need atonement over there, Bechlal, because in that level you didn't sin. It's even higher than the Balarotzen. You don't need to nipshach slicha. There is no slicha needed because you never sinned over there. Explained elsewhere, binyan itzuma shel yom kippur, and the idea was says in Yom Kippur, the day of itself of Yom Kippur is atones. That the atonement that comes because of the day itself, it's not an act of forgiving. But on that day, that connection of the essence of the neshama with essence of Hashem, with atzmus, is revealed. You don't have to do it. Means the day itself. You don't have to daven. You don't do anything. Yom Kippur itself forgives. That means that on that day, what is revealed, a connection of the essence of the neshama with the atzmus. That is high in balarotzen. That level, there's no blemish to begin with. That's the level of Yom Kippur that is Nizgala. And then that level is Nimshach in the Pnim, as we'll see in a minute. V'zeu, Shalachrei Mamer Shuvah Yisrael, Ad. After saying Shuvah Yisrael Ad, Moisif Havayah Elokecha. He adds Havayah Elokecha. Why? Because this is already getting close to Yom Kippur. Shabbos Teshuvah. Since Shabbos Teshuvah is already an introduction of Kippurim, Imachem Shuvah the Shabbos Teshuvah, the Teshuvah Shabbos Teshuvah Tzrich Eliyas needs to be loyrak ad, not to ad, not even ad lad b'chlal. Shali Dezi is battle kol abgomim. That all the begomim will be this battle, even the level of balarotzen. And the tzorich gam la'eiru legalus as nakudas hayans. You got to arouse and you got to reveal the point of Yiddishkeit. That tie of the essence of the neshama with the essence of Hashem, Shalomaylo, Gam Balarotzen, which is even higher than Balarotzen. Shalagabe, next to that level, even Havayah b'nikud Elokim, Gam Havayah b'nikud Elokim, Horak b'chinas Elokim v'tzimtzum. It's Havayah Elokecha, it's only tzimtzum. V'aydeizem izgale, and when that comes upon the Yom Kippur, it's Sumash Yom Kippur, and Shabbos Teshuvah also tells us Havayah Elokecha, that even the level of Bal HaRotzen is only Elokecha, but then it tells us, it revealed that the built Ritzuyim hem rak b'chitzonis, they're only external. Avol b'pnimius mitzadis kashrus the Yisrael v'kutzbrichu. Because of that bound, because of that tie of a Yid and Hashem, to begin with, there was not any non-desirable matters. So the Rebbe explained that on Yom Kippur, and now also on Shabbos Teshuvah, you bring out the deepest level, the level of atzmus, which is higher than even the level of balarotzen. It has no connection to the lower madrega. That brings out that the pnimius of a yid is connected to the pnimius atzmus and sof, and over there melchatchila you don't need slicha. There's no slicha. And that revelation shows that in the chitzonius there was a sin, but bipnimius a yid is connected. There's no sin. There's always a connection there, and that's mizgala on Yom Kippur. But that gilui on Yom Kippur gets revealed into the revealed level of the neshama, and the neshama has nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. That level of the yechida, of the atzmus, which is revealed on Yom Kippur, impacts also the level of nefesh, and that has the highest level comes down into the lowest of the levels. That the actual slicha takes place in the level which is shaykhus to the level of nefesh. Let's look inside. Hey, we can say shekam b'yom kippurim yeshnom shnei inyonim. On Yom Kippur, there's just two inyonim. While we have the highest level, but we also have the impact on the lowest levels. Hagilui de'etzem haneshama shemekusheret ima atzmos. We have the revelation of the essence of the soul, which is tied to atzmos. And also, v'zeh, the idea she'inyan zeh nizgale bedargis haprotius haneshama, that this idea of the etzem haneshama is revealed in the detailed levels of the neshama. It comes down ad ledargas nefesh shabo, till the level of nefesh of the neshama, the nefesh of the nefesh ruach neshama. The lowest is the level of neshama. That there too, that level of yechida, or level highest level, the etzem neshama, impacts, and it comes down even in the nefesh shabo. Shal yidei zeh mizgalis hakapore. Because you need, otherwise, in the level of Yechida, the level of Atzmus of the Neshama, there is no Chet L'Chatchila, there's no sin over there. But through the revelation of Atzmus, Ayidei Zeh Misgalis HaKapore, Shaboifra, now that atonement in this way, that is no Shaykh is even a sin, Gam Ba'adarg is the Neshama, Shashayach Ben Pagam, also into the levels of the soul, which do have a connection to a pagam. So these galus of the etzem and neshama impacts that in those levels too, that it should be revealed over there, and it should take away the pagam. Bezehu, and this is the idea that Yom Kippurim hu Yom shenischayi b'hei tefillos. Yom Kippur it's a day that needs 5 tefillos, meaning 5 tefillos, 5 prayers represent the different levels of the soul. But the day requires 5 tefillos. Basically, we need to reach from the highest level to the lowest level, to all the levels of the neshama. The deepest and highest level of the neshama impacts also the other levels of the neshama. We have all 5. On Yom Kippurim, it's a day that you have 5 tefillos. It explains. Hey, tefillos, why do we have 5? They correspond to the 5 names that the neshama is called: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. So, what does it mean? The Inyan Yom shenischayi b'hei tefillos, but the day where 5 prayers are obligated to ushagilui the etzem neshama. That means that the revelation that comes from the essence of the soul, which comes from the essence of the day, Mizgale bedargis haprotius shelo, is revealed in the very specific levels of the neshama, in all the details. The highest, it's tefillos, because the highest level is revealed in the lowest level. You actually get slichas to the lower levels. And the Rebbe says we can add here shachiluk ben heya tefillos. The difference between the 5 davenings that we do. The first one is corresponding to the nefesh, and then the ruach and the neshama. Each one, we're not just davening. He was saying, when this davening, etzem neshama comes to the level of nefesh. The next davening comes the ruach. Next comes the neshama. It's not just in which level the neshama, the etzem is nizgale, elagam behagilui, but there's also a difference in the gilui, the not just where it's revealed, but how great the gilui is. That the gilui in the nefesh is more in the level, when you are in the level of Yechida by Ne'ilah, in the nefesh, more than when you are in another level. That's a greater gilui. The etzem ha-nefesh is more begilui when it comes to the higher level. The higher level is, the more begilui it is. The betfilas Ne'ilah, Bechinas Yichida, when the level of Neila, which is level Yichida, Hagilu, Hu Yoser, Mi Bedala, that Lifneza. The revelation is more than the 4 levels of davening that preceded it. Balderech Zeh, Hu Benegeya, La Daled Hatfilos Atzmo. Similarly, it's also, that's we're talking about the level of Yichida as it's revealed more in Yichida, but also the davenings. The davenings itself, Shachiluk Ugam Ba'ifan Hagilui, that there's a difference each davening, how much Gilui it comes. The same thing is the level of Lamaila, how far the Gilui comes. When we come to the Gilui, the highest level, the Gilui is much greater. Why is Yom Kippurim a day that you're obligated 5 tefillas? It has to come down. How does it come down? Into all the levels. Yom Kippurim, hu aliyas hamalchus ba'atik. Because Yom Kippurim, the malchus goes up all the ways to atik, pnimis hakeser. Kimavur b'siddur, as explained in the siddur. That would be the level of Elikim, the Havayah b'nigad Elikim. The inyan zeh hu b'chol yom. That is every day that the Malchus goes up in Atik is all day of Yom Kippur, the entire day. But there are several different madregas. There's many steps. Where in Atik it goes up to? The Iker ha'aliyah hu ben ilo. The highest aliyah comes in the ilo, kavur b'sidr. And that level of main aliyah is in the Ila, and that's brings the level into every single level of the neshama. Hine, adargos the Yom Kippurim nechlokos lebeis dargos klolius. These levels, the steps of Yom Kippurim, can generally be divided into 2 general steps. Sometimes the pasuk calls it Shabbos and he, a feminine, Loshen Nikeva, that Yom Kippur is he. Sometimes the pasuk says Shabbos and hu, Loshen Zohar. And both of these levels, the Beis HaDargis, Hein Ba'atik, they're both in the Atik. The level of Yom Kippur is an Atik, it's a Panimis HaKeser. Eloshe Ba'atik, Shnei Pirushim. But in Atik, that we say that it's an Atik, there's 2 interpretations. Shebechlolus, generally speaking, Bechina ha'elyoina shebekeser, the higher level in Keser. We talk about Keser, there is Pnimis HaKeser and Chitzonis HaKeser. The higher level of Keser, Ubefrat, and especially Hatlas Reishin שובה, it's known in the Kabbalah that the Keser has the 3 heads of the Keser. The Keser has 3 heads, Tlas Reishin. And one of them is Radlo, Reshet Lo Yisyada. That's the highest point of the Keser. So that this class Reishin, I think imagining in a tzir, that would be a crown that has 3 points on the top of the crown. So the Keser, in general, there's the Pnimis HaKeser, then you have the 3 heads, the 3 Roshim. I'm not sure if this is exactly with the physical picture of 3 points within the crown, but then you have the middle point, which is the highest point. That's the ratio, the Lo Yisyada. That's the non-known, the highest level. So generally, the higher level of Keser, especially when we talk about the 3 Reishin that is in Keser, Nikrois B'Shem Atik. That's called Atik. That's the higher level in Keser. But there is with Iker Ha'inyan, the Atiko, but the main aspect, idea of Atika, who Ein Sof Shabbat Las Roshin. It's not the Las Roshin themselves, but it's the Ein Sof which is in the three Roshin. So V'achiluk Ben Shtei Dargis Hanalhu. So the difference between the two levels, Shabbos Shabbos and Hu, and Shabbos Shabbos and He, they're in Atik, but what's the difference? The Shabbos Shabbos and He, Loshen Nikeva, Hu Ba'atik. That's the level of Atik. But Lasration Shaboy, those are what houses the Ein Sof in the level of Keser with Lasroshin. That's the feminine. Shabahem Nichlol Gamrad Lo. In these three heads, the 3 points, 3 heads, includes also the highest of them, which is Reisha Deloi is Yado, which is the highest within Atik of Keser. But that's still he, Shabbat Nikeva. The Shabbos Shabbosin Hu, the masculine is Loshen Zochar, who Ba'erin Sof Sheberad Lo. That's the Eirin Sof in the highest of the 3 Roshin, which is Reshat Lo Yisyado, the Eirin Sof, not the Nikeva, but the Zochar, the Ein Sof, which is in Radlo. So Ba'al Pizeh Yesh Leimar Toisus Vir Bozeh. So based on this, we can add more explanation in the fact Mamer Shuvah Yisrael Ad. After saying Shuvah Yisrael Ad, which is Ad Lo Ad B'chlal, Moisiv Havayah Elokecha, he adds still Havayah Elokecha. Ki Ad V'Loi Ad B'chlal, Hu Ba'atik. So Take Ad V'Loi Ad B'chlal, when we talk about in higher than Ishtalshlus, brought down Kimuv El'ilsiv Gimel L'Kutei Torah, is level of Atik. And V'zeh Shehavayah Kelekim Yichoshev, Hashem Elokecha, that even Havayah is Elikim, that is Legabe Eidin Sof Shalamaylam Havayah. That's the Eidin Sof, which is B'chal higher than Havayah. Yesh Loimar Shezeu Legabe Eidin Sof Sheberad Lo. That's the Hu, the Eidin Sof, which is in the Reshet Lo Yisyada, which is a higher level. So relative to the level of Eidin Sof in Radlo, that is what Havayah is really Elokecha, because that's the higher level, that's the essence, that is what's Niskala on Yom Kippur. In Keser itself, as we said before, Atzmos in Keser, that's the Ein Sof, which is in the Reisha de Leisyad. So now we have more clearly defined exactly the madregas we're talking about when we're talking what comes in Yom Kippur. So essentially, we're saying that the Eirin Sof in Radlo is what's Nizgala, the Etzem on Yom Kippur, and that's within Atik itself, the higher madrega, and that's the level of which is Nizgala, the Etzem of a Yid with the Etzem of the Ein Sof. But now the Rebbe is going to explain actually that the Ma'ila of Yom Kippur is not so much what a high madrega it is, but that high madrega of the etzem can come down to the low madrega. Because you see, it says it's a day in which there were 5 tefillos nischayev, even though the day itself is more than the 5 tefillos. It's atzmus. It's the Ein Sof in Radlo. How come we're saying 5 tefillos, which are the levels of the different levels of the neshama, is because the level of Yechida is mainly when it impacts. The Rebbe says when you do, the fact that the Etzem HaNeshama, when it's Nizgala, it can atone for sins of a tzaddik. What would be a sin of a tzaddik? He davened and learned, but he had yeshus. That's okay, that can be forgiven. But we're talking about that the essence of a Yid can also forgive when a person has done literally an Aveda. So that's how powerful the kesher of the Atzmus with a Yid is, that even for the Aveda, that is the highest Madregi. That's why it's stuck in the expresses and the eight tefillos in all different levels. Let's look inside. The fact that we say that what is the advantage of Yom Kippurim is that it's a day in which you are obligated in the 5 davenings Why do we count that as the Maila? There's a greater Maila than the 5 tefillas. It's the day itself, the Gilui Atzmus, his kashrus, ein sof beradlo, af shayim atzmai, even though the day itself, Gilui, his kashrus, ha'atzmis, the etzem anashoma, ima atzmus, that day itself, the revelation of that tie, that the atzmus is tied to the essence of the neshama, is higher than the 5 names. Who Naila Yosem Mizeshin is Chayiv Beit Tefillah. That's greater than that it's a day that you have to do 5 davenings, which is Hagilui, Ba'adarges HaProtius and Neshama. That's the revelation in the detailed levels of the Neshama, that from the Etzem and Nefesh it comes down into the Prot of the Neshama. So why do we say it's a Yom Shin Chayiv? Should say Yom Kippur. It's a day where there's the Gilui Etzem HaNeshama. His kashas atzmis. No, because Taka the Chiddush is in the fact that it can atone even in the level of nefesh, even in the lower level, in the 5 madregas. Hu kizeh she'etzem haneshama mizgalis b'dargis haparotiyus shelo. The fact that the essence of the neshama is revealed in the specifics levels of the neshama. Shal yidei zeh hakapore b'hamokim shehoyo b'tchilas hadgam. That's the way is the kapora is in the place which the blemish was in the beginning. In other words, there was a blemish over there, and yet it gets atoned for through these galus of esem neshama. Yesh baza yisrin, that there's something greater in that. Legaba darga de esem neshama. If you measure it next to the level, the Etzem HaNeshama, the greatest level, no, it's even greater that the Etzem HaNeshama can be expressed in Begilui in the other levels of the Neshama to bring about a tikkun of the Begomim. Hagam sheba b'chinas nefesh ruach neshama, ubefrat b'chinas nefesh, even though in the levels of nefesh ruach neshama of the neshama, especially the level of nefesh, mitzad atzmo, on their own, without the galus of etzem nefesh, on their own, the way they are, shaykh pegomim. Over there, it's possible blemishes. Avo pikenem eskaprim, and they're atoned for. That's a greater level than just talking about that Yom Kippur is the galus of etzem nefesh. The Yisayim is and it's not just that they're forgiven. Like we said, you're forgiven also from the level of Baal Horotzin. But no, you're forgiven as if you never sinned. The atonement that comes from Yom he beoifen in such a way, it's revealed that in an inner way, they never had a blemish. All what happened over there was only chitzonius. What happened with the nefesh was not really an essence blemish, but it was only an external canal. So this is as far as saying that it expresses itself in the areas of the nefesh, that the essence expresses itself in nefesh. But the same thing is also in the atonement, that it atones even for sins, literal sins, in the simple thing, the sin the way you are in the nefesh. Similar, it's also in the matter of the atonement itself, that the atonement can actually, it's greater to know that the atonement can actually atone for sins itself. That's a greater level of atonement that you reach, that even where there is a mamash sin, the main novelty of atonement to be kipshutim. That's when atonement, if you actually sin, that's where there is the main thing that even that can be forgiven. Sometimes you have sins which is for tzaddikim. They didn't do it fully, or they did their mitzvos with the yeshus, with the pnimim. That's not such a chiddush, they can be forgiven, because that's a nature thing that they didn't. But here the person Papash violated. The Baal Shuvah, he violated, and still can be forgiven. The atonement for sins of tzaddikim. what kind of a atonement does a tzaddik if he doesn't do nothing wrong? But he needs an atonement because the yesh mishoyev. Instead of loving Hashem with bittul, with total negation, he is a yesh that loves Hashem. And relative to the level of a tzaddik, that's like taking off the yoke and not obeying Hashem, because why are you being a yesh in your avodah? That's not such a big chiddush to be atoned for that. Kivan shal chatoyim elu, because in this sense, ein shaykh loymar shein hepach rotzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can't say that it's against Hashem's will. Because that feeling of sense, of yeshus, of entity, that's the nature that Hashem has ingrained, instilled. That's the natural way. So the fact that you are atoned for that is not such a novelty. The main novelty, and therefore that's the main advantage, is the atonement for sins literally. Here it's revealed the toikev habilti mugbal shel hihais kashrus the Yisrael v'kutshabrichu. Over here is revealed that force, that unlimited force of the connection, the tie of the Yidden and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shekam kishosu hepech, even when they did opposite the will of Hashem, they chose. It wasn't something just in nature, but they took something and they did against His will of Hashem. Through the tshuva and atonement, they become desirable before Hashem, blessed, as if they never sinned. That's a tremendous chiddush. So the revelation, the Rebbe says, is when the level of the neshama, or the essence of neshama, is revealed in the other level, in the hey madregas, and also the way it works in sins kipshuta. The main revelation, the main chiddush is to be miskaper for a literal sin when you violate the will of Hashem, and still the essence is so strong that it's as if you never sinned, which is much more powerful than to take away from the sin of a tzaddik, which was a yesh, which is not violating the will of Hashem, because that comes from nature. And the Rebbe said this is also the meaning when we say about שובה is greater than a tzaddik. We're not talking about שובה and a spiritual sin, that tzaddik sin. We're talking about literally. That is where the real revelation of the Esa Neshama is revealed, when somebody does שובה, when he did a Mevera Mamish. V'zehu Shomer Azal. And this is what our sages of blessed memory say. In a place where the Baal Tshuva stand, complete tzaddikim cannot stand there. The Yesh Leimer, we can say, even though it maybe goes on all Baal Tshuvas, wherever, even the tzaddik who does tshuva, but the Rebbe says we can say, this saying of our sages does not go out from its simple meaning. It means simply, which the main advantage when we're talking about Baal Tshuva is greater than the tzaddik, is talking about people that do tshuva literally. The Rebbe gives now another explanation. The real literal level of teshuva and averos, that's where the force of that connection, the atzmus, is really revealed, that you can take a grubba sin, that's real aveda, and turn that around. And the Rebbe explains another interesting thing, because there's a question about the Arizal. Why did the Arizal say confessions? And we say that it explains in there that it's because we're all Yidden are connected, so he was saying for other Yidden's aveda. So the Rebbe says, why didn't he say the answer? Even of somebody like the Arizal, in his level, there's also an aveda that he said vidu for. But the Rebbe says no, because the main chiddush is a real aveda. And through being connected with other Yid, that was a real aveda for the Arizal too. Abizeh Yuvan. Now we understand that we're talking about there's a Maila in Dafke Tshuva from Avera Kipshute, Mashemei, Viat Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek brings down the Sefer Time HaMitzvos Rabbi Chaim Vital from this book of Sefer Time HaMitzvos from Chaim Vital. The Zesha Arizal Oinoig Lemer Prota Viduimhu. Why would the Arizal have the tradition to say the details of the confessions? But the Arizal didn't do any sins. Kikol Yisrael Hem Guf Echad. We're all one body. So if another Yid sinned, that's him too. He can say Vidui for the other Yid. Why did the Arizal have to explain so? Why couldn't the Arizal say he's talking about confession for sins on a higher level? L'chayro he could have said, Shaviduyim, Shalom Arizal, that the confession, what did Rabbi Chaim Vital have to say that? Rabbi Chaim Vital could have said that the confession of Arizal, those were on matters that are totally on a very refined, not in the gross, real sins. We're talking about in his level, which that would be considered. And that's what we're saying. Why didn't he answer like that? Similarly, we said that even by a tzaddik, if he feels himself, he has an entity, and he loves Hashem, that's also considered a chait needs a kapara. So he said vidu for that. Why did Rabbi Chaim Vital not answer that? But he said he was saying it for the avedas of another yid because we're all guf echad. So he says, "V'zeshem avayim daviduim shel Arizal hoyu gam al chatoim pshutim." But we're saying that the confession was even on literal sins. Mipnei shekol Yisrael hem guf echad, because of all Yidden are one body. Why did we give this explanation? Yesh loymar. We can say ki al pi bir zeh davke move on, because according to this explanation, we can understand that way we know that Arizal had also the advantage of literally about Shuvah, because the other people who are one body with Arizal, they literally did an Avera. And since the Arizal is connected with them, he's saying confession. So the Arizal has the real madrega of about Shuvah, which is somebody who did an Avera, which is really the ultimate greater level, not so much what your connection is, but that the connection leads you that even in a real Avera, you still are able to do Tshuva, because the power of your connection is so strong that it can take away even literally an Avera. Now the Rebbe goes even further. Not only in the level of tshuva, which is the level of dilug, and you get the level of the yechida and the gilui of atzmut in sof and in radlo, but the main thing, as it manifests itself later on in the avodah of Torah mitzvos, in the usual and the normal avodah over there, that the Torah mitzvahs that follow are done in a much higher level. Let's look inside. Zayin. Yes, Lois, if we can add, she'ikir hachidush v'hamayla shebebalit Shuvah, that the main novelty and the advantage about Shuvah, who ba'avoida the Torah mitzvahs shelachere Shuvah. That's the avoida and Torah mitzvah which follow Shuvah. Because Shuvah itself is the level of beyond. Kavodas hatshuva hiladalik shur. That's to jump over the wall, to go beyond. Shaloi kiseda v'derech ishtalshlus. Not in the order and the way of ishtalshlus. So that's tshuva. V'lachein, and therefore, because the avodah is in a way of dalik, not in an orderly way, gilui his kashrus ha'atzmis, the etzem ha'neshama im ha'atzmus, the revelation of that essence tie that the neshama has with atzmus, shal yidei ha'tshuva v'ha'kapora, that comes through tshuva and the atonement, that the person is forgiven, and you see how the yid is connected to atzmus. Im hiyois shehagiluhu bedargis elu shebehem hoya apagam. So although the revelation comes down to those levels of nefesh in which there was the begam, and generally not only nefesh, but nefesh ruach neshama. That is in a way that the nefesh ruach neshama are on the level going up. Lehatargis Chaya Yichida. They're elevated to Chaya Yichida. Bad le'etzem haneshama, to the essence of the neshama. So the etzem haneshama impacts nefesh ruach neshama as the nefesh ruach neshama are rising to the Chaya Yichida. Torah mitzvahs is to bring it down in the Hamshocha. Ve'ikir achidush v'mayla Teshuvah ubozeh. The main novelty and the advantage of Teshuvah is in the case Sha'idei HaTeshuvah, that through the Teshuvah gam ha'avodah the Torah mitzvahs, even the service, the way of Torah mitzvah b'cheli yatir is more forced. Sha'avodah b'Torah mitzvahs he b'seder mesudar. That's not a jump. That's not like the Teshuvah. That's already follows, has to be in an orderly way. The Reiv HaMitzvahs, Yesh Lam Shirim Mitzumtzum, most mitzvahs have a very specific, restricted shir. What do you need to do in order to do the mitzvah? Kibur B'Tanya. Balachas Kam V'Kam, and for sure that's mitzvahs. For sure, Limud HaTorah, Shehi B'Avona V'Asoga, which is with understanding and grasping. And we want that the Etzem HaNeshama should impact even in the Seder V'Hadroga, not as it's going up in the level of Teshuvah, but in the level that's coming down in an orderly fashion. Through the fact that the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs that follow Teshuvah is more force, Hagilui the Chaya Yichida, the revelation of Chaya Yichida, I guess the Madrega, even the etzem is even higher than Chaya Yechida. Here we're talking about the 5 levels. There are still shemis, but then there's level of the etzem haneshama, which is even higher. Is benaran when it comes down to the nefesh ruach neshama, that's in the level of the way they're below. Not they're not in a tenu of Allah. And more than that, not only the Avodah Torah mitzvahs, but you make an impact in the world. Shaydei Havayah Torah mitzvahs through the Havayah Torah mitzvahs nasagam ha'olam dirulei yisbarach. That makes also the world, besides himself, as a blessing for as dwelling place for Hashem blessing. Vayideiza nishlames hakavona dirid v'tachtonim. That way, it's concluded the kavona of dirid v'tachtonim. Who did Hashem consult? The souls of tzaddikim, whether he should create the world or not. Why does it say the souls of tzaddikim? Even though it seems should be even on a higher level, but no, because we know Baal Tshuva are greater than tzaddikim. The ultimate kavanah should be a dira for Hashem below. That takes place through Avodah Tzaddikim. That's the ultimate goal. Avodah Torah mitzvahs. But so you need Avodah Tzaddikim. When is Torah mitzvahs done in a complete way? First you do tshuva, and then the ma'asim tovim are great. So Avodah Torah mitzvahs, he b'cheli yatir is more force. V'idei zeh b'toysa b'agilui elikus shebe'odom b'alderech zagam b'odom. That way you add the revelation of godliness in the person and also in the world. V'idei zeh nishlemes yoyser hakavona dir b'tachtonim. That way also the intention of dir b'tachtonim is completed. So therefore it turns out it's not in the tshuva, but it's in the Torah mitzvahs that follow. That's why it said Mishmasei Mishal Tzadikim, because ultimately the goal is to make a dirulei zbara b'tachtonim. Oisches. V'zeu Shuvah Yisrael ad Havayah Elokecha goymer Kechu Imachem Devarim. So now he's going to go back to explain the pasuk. First we said Shuvah Yisrael Havayah Elokecha, and then we go on to say Kechu Imachem Devarim. What are the words he says that we have to add afterward? And what is the VeShuvu Havayah? This that he adds take along words Mamer Shuvah Yisrael Havayah Elokecha. After he says you turn to Havayah Elokecha, he's going to give 2 interpretations. The first interpretation is Kimitzad Goydel Ha'ilu Shabavodas HaTeshuvah. Because of this great advantage of Avodas HaTeshuvah, that we connect the Gilui of Atzmus and Ubefrat ba tshuva, the tshuva goyim radavai lekecha, especially not the regular tshuva, but tshuva till the adavai lekecha, with the highest level, till radlo, the Yirin Sof in radlo. Shahat tshuva he, b'chinas ad v'lad b'chlal, it's ad v'lad b'chlal, and then it's even um, beyond v'seidim mizu Havayah lekecha, as he said, which is even higher than the level of le'ad b'chlal. So so what it does is that on Shuva reveals the essence of the neshama, which is tied to Atzmus, which is even higher than Balarotzen, as explained earlier. So the Pasuk has to tell you, a very high madrega. So so he does not have any connection to fixed blemishes. There's no blemishes. He's on a very high level. Especially in order to correct them. So fixing pagamim, there's no pagamim over there. But especially if he's going to fix them, he has to descend from his level. The pasuk says, you still got to take words. You can't just say, I'm at such a high level of tshuva. There needs to be confession of words, in order to erase the body of the klippas. That's one interpretation. There's another interpretation in Dvarim. This goes up in the mitzvos. Because even in the level of tshuva, which is fixing the sins, even though there is an advantage in tshuva, that the gilu etzem neshama goes into the lower levels in which pagam takes place, that takes from the etzem neshama. Gamze in a maspik, that is not sufficient. But tzarich li is devarim. You still have to take words Torah mitzvos. The devarim goes into Torah mitzvos. Sha'ali deizeh yeh ha'ilu gam ba'adarges the neshama k'moishim lamata. Not as they're standing in an aliyah, as we said before, but even at the levels of the neshama as they're below, not in the way of elevation. Yisayrim is more than that. Sha'ali deizeh nase gambiru v'zichuch ba'olam. There becomes a refinement and a sorting out in the world, and it becomes a dwelling place for Hashem in this low world. The pasuk continues, VeShuvu Havayah. It says now turn to Havayah. So Teshuvah Yisrael, after the Teshuvah of Shuvah Yisrael, till Hashem Elokecha Shu'alo Milmata L'maylo, which is elevation from below to above. So the clear is VeShuvu Havayah, return to Hashem Lahamshich Ha'oir, Milmaylo L'mata, from above to below, Aidei Torah mitzvos, Shem Derech Havayah. Those are the path of Hashem that to continue doing Torah mitzvos. V'aidei Zeh Mamshichim Kol HaHashpos. This way we draw down all the flow, Lo Rak Binyanim Ruchnim, not only into spiritual levels, Elogam Binyanim Gashmim, also into physical levels. V'monachayim Zein Revicha, children, life, and wide sustenance. Mamer Shuvah, as the Alter Rebbe said, the Eibishter git Eden Gashmis. Hashem gives us physicality. When Eden Imachem from the Gashmis Ruchnis, and we take the physicality, make it spirituality. We make for Hashem a dwelling place in the low world. Through this, the kingdom will be to Hashem. So this is the ultimate, is to do the Torah mitzvahs in this world, not just to elevate to the idol, to bring the dir b'tachtonim, and that brings down not only spirituality, but also bonachaya umzein revicha.